Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us Across the Fence. I'm Keith Silva. A couple of years ago, I attended a high school graduation. There was pomp and circumstance and all the other ceremonial moments that I expected. There was also a land acknowledgement. A student read a statement that the ground we were standing on was once the traditional territory of Indigenous people. On this Indigenous Peoples Day, we wanted to talk about the purpose of these statements and why land acknowledgements are often the first step public and private institutions can take to reflect and to begin to understand past and present relationships to Indigenous people. To discuss this topic, we've asked Sherwood Smith to join us. Sherwood is the Senior Executive Director for Inclusive Excellence and Faculty Engagement at the University of Vermont. Thanks for coming in and talking with me, Sherwood.
Happy to be here, Keith.
Great. Let's define our terms to start. What is the sort of dictionary definition of a land acknowledgement?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know if there is a dictionary one, but I would say a land acknowledgement is a statement which attempts to recognize that the lands and waters currently occupied by the vast majority of us are the traditional and ancestral lands and waters of Indigenous people.
Pretty straightforward and very much of an acknowledgement. Why are these acknowledgements important?
One, they raise awareness. You talked about the high school event. People may not have ever considered who were the Indigenous people that were traditional stewards of these lands. People may not be aware of the histories of Indigenous people in the country. So it's a recognition. It is often by an organization attempt to build relationships which they have not had in the past with Indigenous people. And to some extent, it's an easy step. It's just words, and so it's an easy place for people to start. It doesn't require a lot of money. It doesn't require a lot of people's time.
Right. We'll talk about some of the easiness. The UVM Board of Trustees approved a resolution for adopting an official land acknowledgement in October of 2022. Why is this important for the University of Vermont specifically?
One, we are the University of Vermont, the State Agricultural College, so we are a land grant school, which suggests that we have responsibility to all of the peoples in the state. Two, a land grant institution suggests whose land was it granted from, right? And so recognizing that these lands are part of a history of Indigenous people. Three, I think the institution, though it has had a history of relationships with the Abenaki, wanted to take a deeper step into those relationships. As I said, an opportunity to build relationships. Right. And two, it's simply acknowledging the reality.
Right. The history, acknowledging the history, what this was at one time.
What it was at what time, that when I grew up in New Jersey, in high school and elementary school, if you'd read the textbooks, it sounded like Indigenous people had disappeared.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so acknowledging that, yes, there is a history and there are current issues and contexts we should be thinking about. So it's both history and present.
Right. Indigenous people are part of the present. They are not relegated to just the past. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, what sort of organization should be providing or adopting these land acknowledgements? I talked about the high school. We said UVM. Is this something that private businesses should be doing as well?
I believe the Smithsonian has one.
Okay.
A number of companies, the American Art Institute in Chicago, a lot of national recreation organizations have them that are connected to the outdoors. I don't know that there's an organization, public, private, large or small, that I'd say it wouldn't benefit from having one.
Absolutely, yeah.
But organizations which by their nature claim to serve the general public, it seems appropriate.
Right, absolutely. Should this practice of land acknowledgements extend to other things? Say if a building was constructed using slave labor, or is that something that is that part of an acknowledgement, a land acknowledgement, or just an acknowledgement? I was thinking specifically of the White House.
There's an excellent book about who built the White House. Right. Brown University went through this issue because a lot of their money for the founding came out of the slave trade. But land acknowledgements have been specifically focused on Indigenous people. Dartmouth College, for example, the funding for that was gotten out of England on the assumption that they were going to educate, at that time, the Native Americans here. Okay. It took a long time before that actually got really implemented on their part. I think acknowledgement as a broad concept is beneficial.
Sure.
People contest that it's rewriting history. I think it's just accurately documenting the facts that occurred.
Right.
Some of those facts are troubling, but few of us are perfect, and countries and institutions are the same way.
What's your advice for creating a land acknowledgement? You consulted on UVM's land acknowledgement. You didn't actually put pen to paper. So what's your advice if someone is going to try to write one of these acknowledgements?
Well, at this point in history, there's probably hundreds out there to look at.
Okay.
There are some websites that talk about some key components, and it depends on your organization. I wouldn't expect a land acknowledgement by a pharmaceutical company to mirror one by the Green Mountain Outdoors Club, for example. I think ideally you should be creating a relationship with the Indigenous people before you do the land acknowledgement. If it's to have meaning, then it's in relationship to the people that you're acknowledging, so that would be an ideal step. Some tribes actually already have one. It's a little different because they're acknowledging their relationship to the land versus our acknowledgement of the history. So I would say start building a relationship with Indigenous people if your organization doesn't have one.
Right.
And I would say definitely take a look at what's there, and I would engage your whole organization, so it's not like somebody in some strange office wrote one and then everybody's going, well, why did this happen and what are we supposed to do with it?
Right. There's more. It doesn't occur in a vacuum. You just don't write one and say like, hey, we wrote our land acknowledgement. We're all set. Check. Exactly. Looking into this, they started in the 1970s, from what my internet research told me. Started in Australia to honor Aboriginal lands and the people, and developed more widespread support in the 2000s in the US and Canada. Language is so important in these acknowledgements. Is this something where you said, honoring the history, being clear about the history, so are words like stolen and genocide and things like that, are those words that should occur in these kinds of statements? Should it be bare bones history, Sherwood?
I'm not sure. If we had longer, I'd have you talk about what bare bones history actually
I guess
means.
Straightforward. No, don't sugarcoat anything.
What role is your organization going to have beyond the land acknowledgement should have some influence on the language used in it.
Understood.
Right? Has there been genocide in my view from the history? Yes. Has there been utter disregard for treaties that were written with Indigenous people? Yes. Those are facts in my mind. I'm not sure that a land acknowledgement is a history lesson in that sense.
Very well said.
So I think that actually doing a land acknowledgement to some people is a pejorative statement. So I don't know that I would not say genocide, but it would be different if actually the organization you were part of was actually responsible for it.
Understood. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you wasn't directly responsible, I'm not sure that needs to go into a land acknowledgement. I think that if you're talking with people about why, that's a topic that could be discussed.
Right. Again, as you said, building these relationships ahead of time. If you're working with Indigenous folks and you understand what their concerns are, what their history is, then there may be language that needs to be included that's appropriate to what happened, rather than sort of adding things that weren't there or weren't germane to the situation, is essentially what you're saying.
I'm saying just like a mission or a vision statement, it's a short, concise piece. It's not pages long. It's not even usually a page long, it's a paragraph. If the only thing, and this is what you're hinting at, if the only thing you're doing is writing this one paragraph, if you're not educating the staff, if you're not educating your constituents, your clients, then it possibly is an empty gesture. Gotcha. And the things you're talking about should be part of the larger education. Okay. What has been our role in, my words, the subjugation of Indigenous people? What has been our role in failing or supporting them up until now? Right. Are things that should be discussed by the organization. It isn't the land acknowledgement.
Right. That's the statement part of it. There's a lot more other work that has to happen. So land acknowledgements are not without controversy or criticism. Some say unchecked political correctness, out of control wokeism. Others, including Indigenous people, feel it's an empty gesture. It's just words, as you said a little bit earlier. How do you respond to both sides of the argument?
Things are very rarely, in my view, either or. They're often both and.
Yes.
So land acknowledgements, depending on how they're structured and what goes with them, could be empty gestures. I don't think that's untrue. I think Indigenous people, I'm not speaking for them because that's not part of my community, like any other community, probably hold a variety of views. You could probably talk to someone that says this is a worthless piece of paper and doesn't mean anything because nobody's doing anything.
Right.
You could talk to another group of people that says this is an important first step. And you could talk to a third group that says this is, land acknowledgements are something we do as Indigenous people and we don't need others to do.
Gotcha.
All of those could be true. I don't have an easy response to the first piece of unchecked political correctness. Are you politically correct because when you talk to your grandparents, you talk in a different way than you talk to your friends on a Friday night out with them? Are you being politically correct with your grandparents, or are you being politically correct with your friends at the local establishment? Right? I think if you mean political correctness is attempting to behave in a way that addresses other people's feelings and concerns, then I would encourage there to be more unchecked political correctness. But if you mean that some people are concerned because they have a feeling of if we present anything that presents the U.S. in anything less than perfection, that is detrimental to our national image, then that's absolutely true. I think some people hold that perspective. I don't know how you write a history of a country which is perfect for any country or person.
Well said. Just less than a minute to go, and this question deserves probably another 13 minutes, but so much of land acknowledgements, we've said it throughout the throughout the program, is you've got to do the work. It's not just writing this statement, checking a box, as you said earlier. What does that look like? What should that look like? The doing the work. What is actually, you write the statement, you've built these relationships. How does that continue?
If you've built the relationships prior to writing the statement, if, as I said, this is something that you have attempted to disseminate throughout the organization, then you should be getting input from your membership, clients, board, whatever, about their interest in engagement, because you've now explained why it's important and they've understood it. You should have gotten feedback from the Indigenous people you've been in contact with in terms of what could be done. You've looked at other organizations and seen what steps they've taken.
Right.
So there's a wealth of information about possible steps, I think, but I think building the relationship before you write the statement and doing the work to make sure the organization has this as part of their overall understanding gives you a lot of opportunities to find ways to engage both at the organizational level and at your individual members.
Well, Sherwood, thank you very much for talking about this. Like I said, we could have done a lot more. And a thanks goes out to everyone here at WCX for making this program possible. And to remind you, if you missed any portion of today's program or you want to watch it again, find us on YouTube or Facebook by searching Across the Fence. Take care.